this is Vishwasanand, and today I am going to show you a demo of our product called Entity Studio. Entity Studio is a full stack identity infrastructure for building privacy preserving digital identity products using decentralized identities and verifiable credentials. The Entity Studio is built on top of Hypersign Identity Network and is fully compliant with W3C DID and verifiable credential specifications. The Entity Studio can also be used as a visual playground for learning self-sovereign identity concepts. This demo is divided into two parts. The first part, where we learn about how can an identity issuer comes on the platform and issues a verifiable credential to a user. And the part 2 of this demo will explain how can a verifier verifies the credentials in his app when a user presents the credential to him while requesting for a service. So let's begin with the part 1 of the demo. Imagine a user having an identity wallet request a KYC credential from an issuer. By submitting his personal details, the identity issuer log into the Entity Studio platforms using his identity wallet, which is neatly integrated with the Identity Studio login page. Upon login, at first the identity issuer need to create an organization by clicking on the create button. Technically, an organization in the Entity Studio is a public DID whose controller is the admin who has logged into the platform. Give it a name and a domain name and click on the save button to create this organization. Since it's going to be a public on-chain DID, the wallet needs to sign the transaction. And there we go. Our organization DID is created. We can quickly check this DID on the chain by clicking on this link. That's our DID. Our organization DID has been created. Check this controller field. This DID is the different than what is the ID of this DID document. Now we will come back to this in order to understand what's the meaning of uh, these two the controller fields and the ID field here. Now that our organization has been created, we can go ahead and issue a credential to the user. For that, first switch to this organization and then click on create to issue a credential to a user. But wait a minute, we cannot issue a credential unless we have a schema for this credential. Schema is nothing but the format or the model of the credential document. It defines what fields the credential is going to contain. So let's just create a schema, give it a name and a description, and then define the fields which is required for this credential. And click on save to create the schema. Again, since the schema is going to be an on-chain, we need to sign the transaction. There we go. The schema has also been registered. We can quickly check the status of the schema on the chain. So this is our schema document and we can see all the properties that we have added, and the author of the schema is basically the organization which has created this schema. So remember, we have an organization DID called it ends with 1Z2QFY, and here the author is again 1Z2QFY. Now that our KYC schema has been created, we are ready to issue a verifiable credential to users. Let us assume that I am going to issue this credential to myself. For that, I need my DID, which I can get from my wallet, and issue the credential to myself. I'll select the schema, populate all the fields with desired values, and give an expiration date and hit the save button to register the credential status on the blockchain. Remember, the verifiable credential is a private document, but the status of this credential gets registered on the chain. So once the credential has been issued, its status gets registered on the chain. Now that the credential status has been registered on the blockchain, we can quickly check the status of the credential on the blockchain as well. So here, the status of the credential is live, when it is issued, when it's going to expire, and also the hash of the credentials, which will be required when someone verifies this credential. Notice the issuer over here is 1ZQFY, which is nothing but the organization DID, right? The organization who has created the credential. So with that, what I'm trying to say is the owner of this schema is also the organization, and the author of this schema and the issuer of this schema is also this organization, and the organization is itself is been controlled by the admins whose DID has been added as a controller in this controller array. Now tomorrow, if this guy decides to transfer this organization to someone else or to add more of his teammates, he should be able to do, and those guys will now have access to these documents, the schema status document. We will come back to this concept again once I explain how we can revoke a credential. The final step of this, the part 1 of this demo, is to send this credential to the user so that he can accept and store this credential in his identity wallet. Click on this icon to generate the QR or a link for user to accept the credential. In the identity wallet, you can see I only have an email schema or an email credential. As a user, I click on this accept credential in the web wallet button and then accept this credential in my wallet. Now if I go to my credentials tab page, I can see I have KYC credential issued to me. I can see all the details, who is the issuer. The issuer is JetQ2FY again, the organization who has issued to me, and all the fields that we defined in the schema is present here. In part 1 of this demo, we have learned how an issuer can issue a verifiable credential using a schema to the user, and how a user can accept the credential in his identity wallet. In part 2, we will see how a verifier can request the credential from the user, who present the credential in a form of something called verifiable presentation to the verifier. The verifier then verifies this presentation and let the user access their self-application or services. In order to request the presentation from the user, the verifier has to first create a presentation template. The presentation template defines what information the verifier needs from the user in order to provide the service. So let's just go ahead and create the presentation template in the Entity Studio dashboard. Give it a name. And select the schema which you want to request. Provide a reason for requesting this information. And hit save to create this presentation template. Remember, the presentation template is not an on-chain activity. Once the verifier creates the presentation template, he can then design the UI to request the credential from the users, either via QR code or via a button. Designing this UI is pretty simple using Entity Studio JavaScript SDK. All you have to do is add this script and listen to few events in your HTML page. For the purpose of this demo, I have created a HTML page and hosted on a server running on port 1234. Once you add the script, make sure to replace this presentation template ID. You can also change the button text if you want to. There we go. The user is ready to present his credential either through scanning this QR code or through clicking this button. Click on this button in order to present this credential to the to the verifier. Authorize it. And here the user has shared his detail or the data with the verifier. So with this, we conclude part 2 of this demo. Before I end this demo, I want to show you two things. First, how can you revoke the credential? So as an issuer, I should have ability to revoke the status of this credential. Go to the credential tab, click on this edit icon and change the status from live to revoke. Now, as you know, the credential status is an on-chain activity, so we need to do an transactions on-chain and provide a reason why you want to revoke this credential. Authorize it. So this credential status has been revoked. Now, if the users try to present the credential again, the verifier should not be able to verify it. So let's try to do that. Could not authorize the user, right? Because the credential status has already been revoked. You can also see the status of the credentials on the blockchain. So this was our chain. Now the credential status says revoked. The reason is some reason which I have given. And finally, I want to talk about how can you give access of your organization to your teammates so that they can now edit or do some activities on this organization. So I have another user in a different browser. So I will pick up his DID and add him in the controller field of the DID document of the organization. And of course I need to do a transaction for this. All right. So now if I open this, I can see there are two controllers who have access to this organization. And if I go back to the dashboard of that user and reload this page, this guy should have access to the organization now. So you can see our organization was Z2QFY, right? If I switch to this organizations, I can see other details like credentials, schema, and so on. So this concludes my entire demo. So just to recap, we created an organization, we created a schema and issued a credential to the user, and then we created a presentation template, and then we designed the UI to request the template from the user's wallet. The user then presents the template. We revoked the credential, and then the template was not able to present. And then finally, we decided to add our teammates to get access of this organization. Now, if I go back to the org DID again, this one, earlier it had one controller and now it will have two controllers who can control this DID document. So with this, what I'm trying to say is this access mechanism is happening on chain, right? So nobody can just go and delete something from the Entity Studio server. Entity Studio server is acting just as a cache. The truth of the data exists on the blockchain. So that was the demo of the Entity Studio. I hope you liked it and learned something, and in future you would like to try it out just to understand the self-sovereign identity concepts. Thank you very much.